Welcome to the deep dive. You send us your reading list, and, well, we become your expert guides. We pull out the crucial insights so you can get informed, without the endless reading.
Exactly. Think of it as understanding the core arguments, maybe with a few surprising details thrown in.
We're here to take those complex sources you've maybe been meaning to get to and just extract the essential knowledge.
Maybe the context, different perspectives
Huh.
really help you grasp what matters.
Okay, so today we're diving headfirst into a work that's, well, it's considered a cornerstone of critical social theory. Herbert Marcuse's One-Dimensional Man.
It's a weighty book, definitely. But its analysis of modern society, it still sparks a lot of debate, offers some really valuable insights, even now.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is to, let's say, unravel Marcuse's examination of contemporary industrial society.
And crucially, how it shapes the way we think and behave. We're working from the excerpts you shared, parts of the book, acknowledgments, table of contents, and that helpful introduction by Douglas Kellner.
Yeah, the Kellner intro. We're going to explore this new phase of civilization Marcuse identified.
Let's jump in. Kellner's introduction, right off the bat, it highlights Marcuse's central idea. Advanced industrial society creates a one-dimensional mode of thought and behavior.
Okay, one-dimensional. What does that, practically mean for us?
Well, Kellner describes it as the repression of all values, aspirations, and ideas which cannot be defined in terms of the operations and attitudes validated by the prevailing forms of rationality.
Wow, okay, so basically anything the system can't easily measure or use, it gets pushed aside,
Yeah,
repressed.
that's the idea. The system increasingly validates only what fits its own operational logic. Everything else becomes marginal.
And the consequence, Marcuse argues, is what? A weakening of criticism?
Exactly. A weakening of real opposition,
Yeah.
any pushback against the status quo, and also kind of an erosion of traditional culture, the parts that used to offer alternative viewpoints.
We see hints of that in the first chapter, right? Where he talks about new forms of control.
Absolutely. And it's not just, old school, heavy-handed control he's talking about.
It sounds much more subtle.
It is. It's about shaping our desires,
Yeah.
our understanding of the world, so we sort of unknowingly become part of the system that might be limiting us.
Okay, maybe some context would help here. Where was Marquise coming from? The intro mentions his early involvement with the Institute for Social Research.
Yeah, that's really crucial background. The Institute, with thinkers like Horkheimer and Adorno, they initially planned this huge systematic work on dialectics.
And Marquise was supposed to be a big part of that.
He was. But then, well, history intervened, World War II,
Right, his focus shifted. He worked on the war effort.
which meant Horkheimer and Adorno ended up taking the lead on that big dialectics project. It became their famous book, Dialectic of Enlightenment.
And while they were doing that, focusing maybe more on philosophy and culture.
Marcuse was involved in something else, another significant project, this time with Franz Newman. It was called Theory of Social Change.
Theory of social change. That sounds different. More practical, maybe. Kellner notes its goal was to develop a positive theory of social change for contemporary society.
Exactly. That sounds quite distinct from the, let's say, often critical, maybe even pessimistic tone sometimes associated with the Frankfurt School.
So Marcuse and Newman were trying to blend philosophy, sociology, and radical politics.
Yes, they felt modern sociology had kind of lost the philosophical depth found in earlier Marxist thought. They wanted to bring that back, systematically examine how societies transform.
So we see these two streams within critical theory then, as Kellner points out. Horkheimer and Adorno, more philosophical cultural critique.
And Marcuse and Newman, a bit more hands-on, focused on understanding and actually fostering social change. It seems Marcuse always had an eye on the practical implications.
That's a really important distinction. He wasn't just about critique. He wanted theory that could, actually do something, drive transformation.
Precisely, strengthening that link between theory and practice, philosophy and politics.
Okay, let's get back to the core idea. One-dimensionality. It sounds so totalizing, like a completely sealed-off system. Is that what he meant?
That's a really common misinterpretation, and Kellner's intro is helpful here. He argues it's a mistake to see one-dimensionality as like a fixed state, a noun describing a society where all opposition is gone.
So it's not game over, total control achieved.
Not how Marcuse originally used it. He mainly used one-dimensional as an adjective, describing deficient conditions.
Deficient conditions in thinking, in society.
Right, exactly. In thought, behavior, social structures. He contrasts these limited one-dimensional states with alternatives, richer, more fulfilling possibilities he thought were worth fighting for.
Oh, okay. That's a crucial nuance.
Hmm.
He's not just doom and gloom then. He's pointing out dangerous trends, but also urging us to think about alternatives.
Yes, he's thinking dialectically, contrasting the narrow, one-dimensional present with the potential for a multidimensional future. It's vital to see him as analyzing tendencies, not necessarily a finished reality.
Right. Not just a theorist of total domination, but someone still seeing potential contradictions.
Okay, shifting slightly. Marcuse also talks about how the tools we use for critique, the very concepts, get affected.
You mean like society, individual, class, those kinds of terms?
Yes. In the 19th century, he says, those terms had real critical weight. They represented actual conflicts and tensions in society.
But now, in the advanced industrial society he's analyzing.
He argues that the increasing integration of society has sort of diluted their critical power. They become less about fundamental conflict and more like neutral descriptions, operational terms.
So the language of critique gets absorbed, repurposed by the system itself.
That's the danger he sees. It makes it harder for critical theory to connect with real social struggles,
Right.
potentially pushing it towards more abstract thought.
Okay, so this brings us to a really central piece, technological rationality. Marquis sees the whole technical apparatus of production and distribution becoming almost totalitarian.
Yeah, and it's not just about factories and machines. He argues this apparatus actively shapes our needs, our skills, even our attitudes.
It blurs the lines between private life and public existence, influences what we want.
Exactly. Think about advertising, how it subtly molds our aspirations. It's a powerful shaping force.
And technology, in this view, isn't neutral. It becomes a really effective form of social control, maybe even more so because it often seems pleasant, right?
Absolutely. Think about the constant stream of media, entertainment. It's control, but not necessarily through overt force.
And he saw this happening not just in the West.
No, he observed similar patterns in communist states too. Kind of convergence driven by industrialization itself, by the logic of technology.
He uses examples like TV and radio,
Yeah.
everyday things, as evidence of these homogenizing trends.
Right. The standardized flow of information, entertainment, it can subtly narrow the range of acceptable thought, encourage conformity.
Which leads us right into the decline of opposition. If our basic needs seem met, maybe the urgency of things like free speech or political dissent fades.
That's his concern. And here, his distinction between true and false needs is really key.
Okay, explain that. False needs.
False needs are those imposed on us by, let's say, social interests invested in repression. Needs that keep us working, consuming, maybe being aggressive. Needs that perpetuate the status quo.
Like the constant push to buy the latest gadget, the newest fashion, things driven by ads.
Exactly. Satisfying them gives temporary pleasure, maybe, but it keeps the system going and distracts from deeper issues.
But who gets to decide what's a true need versus a false one? Isn't that subjective?
Marcuse acknowledges it's complex. He says judging needs is historical, tied to human potential and the best use of resources. It's not a simple checklist.
But here's the paradox, right? Ideally, we should decide what we truly need.
But if our ability to judge is being manipulated, shaped by the very system,
How can we make an authentic choice?
that's the bind. The more effective the social management, even if it seems benign, the harder it is to even imagine real freedom, let alone fight for it.
And this one-dimensional thinking, it affects language itself.
Deeply. He argues political and media figures promote it using these self-validating statements, repeated over and over, until they become almost hypnotic. Definitions.
Like how freedom is defined differently in the West versus the East, narrowly defined to fit the system.
Precisely. In the free world, it often means freedom for private enterprise. In communist states, freedom is the state-approved way of life. Anything outside that narrow box is suspect, subversive.
So language becomes a tool for conformity. It shuts down challenging ideas.
It stifles them, creates these linguistic barriers. And technological rationality, promising affluence and liberty, becomes this kind of all-encompassing framework that absorbs opposition.
Even the working class, Marx's revolutionary subject, gets integrated.
Marcuse discusses how workers in advanced settings can develop a vested interest in their company's success.
He gives examples, right, like workers wanting to help solve production problems.
Yes, feeling a stake in the company.
Yeah.
Even union leaders saying, the corporation now provides things we used to fight for, so we need to find other things the worker wants.
But Marcuse warns that this participation doesn't change the fundamental power structure, does it?
Not if labor just becomes an affirmative force within the existing system. It's incorporation, not transformation.
Still, he does see some counter tendencies, things pushing back.
He does. Technical progress itself, especially automation, is one key factor he highlights.
Ah, going back to Marx's idea that automation could undermine the need for direct labor.
Exactly. If machines do most of the work, the basis of exploiting labor could erode. Pushed to its limits, automation might be incompatible with private exploitation.
And he even speculates the Soviet system might automate faster due to central control.
It's a possibility he raises, yeah,
Yeah.
which could, ironically, force the West to accelerate its own rationalization.
But here's the catch. As human labor shrinks in production,
The traditional political power of the working class also shrinks. And the growing white-collar sector, not necessarily prone to radicalization in the same way.
okay, let's touch on the Soviet system again. He sees it as another form of industrial civilization, right? Different, but with parallels.
Definitely acknowledges the differences history, political structures, but also similarities in the drive for technological control, social management.
He suggests maybe they could avoid capitalist waste, prioritize basic needs better.
In theory, perhaps, alongside military goals, of course. But he also points back to the core Marxist idea of transition, to each according to his needs,
Which requires control by the workers themselves, right? Not the state.
leading to genuine self-determination, not external control. But he observes that, in practice, communist states often postponed that qualitative change. They focused on growth, maintaining the state apparatus.
Hoping quantitative growth would eventually lead to qualitative change, like the state withering away.
That was the underlying hope, yes. But the reality often differed.
This leads to a fascinating point about the enemy, how both systems use an external threat.
Yes, communism versus capitalism. He argues this external threat helps create internal cohesion, suppress dissent within each system.
And this enemy often represents, what does he call it, the specter of liberation.
The very possibility of a different way of life that challenges the current order. Focusing on the threat justifies the status quo, contains internal pressures for change.
And this permanent enemy becomes integrated, drives growth even, turns society into a defense society.
Where military-industrial priorities dominate, and the really chilling part is how this normalizes violence. Annihilation becomes a calculable option.
And in that climate, even democratic freedoms can be co-opted, making democracy itself a system of domination.
Potentially a very efficient one, yes.
Okay, what about culture? Higher culture, art, philosophy.
Marcuse points out that industrial society still pays lip service to Western cultural traditions, but these originated in a pre-technological era,
And now they become commodities, tools in the East-West competition.
losing their power to challenge. Mass media plays a huge role here, blending culture with commercials, reducing everything to its exchange value, not its truth value. Art gets neutralized.
So artistic alienation changes too. It used to be about rejecting the system.
The artist, the outcast. They represented real alternatives in older literature,
But now, those figures become types, curiosities within the system.
affirming it rather than negating it. The rebel becomes a marketable image. Counterculture becomes fashion. The system absorbs its critics.
Leading to what he calls harmonizing pluralism, where contradictions just coexist indifferently.
Their radical potential is diffused, rendered harmless.
And the overall effect of all this productivity and consumption is
It prevents a new consciousness from developing. It bars that crucial space within ourselves needed to imagine and strive for something qualitatively different.
we become cogs. Comfortable cogs, perhaps, but still cogs.
Exactly. Comfort is promised, but the capacity to envision real freedom is restricted. The marginalized might face force, but the majority are pacified by satisfied needs, even if those needs are manufactured.
This sounds like repressive desublimation. Can you unpack that?
Okay, yeah. It's the idea that the pleasure principle gets absorbed by the reality principle in a tricky way. Things like liberated sexuality or aggression get channeled into socially acceptable forms.
They'd actually end up reinforcing the system.
Right. Unlike genuine sublimation, which often retains a refusal to conform. He uses the example of lovemaking, how a mechanized environment might inhibit transcendence, leading to a more contained eroticism.
So more apparent freedom, but it's institutionalized, controlled.
It conditions us to accept what's offered. It can even contribute, he suggests, to an authoritarian personality. Sex gets integrated into work, PR, advertising, making it controllable.
He contrasts this with classical literature's often destructive,
Right.
passionate sexuality.
Versus the desublimated but ultimately safe sexuality in contemporary culture.
Mm.
He even worries that this manipulation could extend to the death instinct, making people approve of war.
It all comes back to language, too, doesn't it? This functionalization of language.
Yes, it repels nonconformity. Concepts get reduced to their operational definitions. Technological reasoning equates things with their functions.
And outside science, this shapes behavior. Words become cliches, blocking deeper meaning. How something works becomes its only meaning.
And we see these self-validating propositions in politics, media, and like those definitions of freedom, repeated endlessly, blocking alternatives,
Creating a universe of discourse that never really challenges the fundamentals.
full of synonyms, tautologies, dominant concepts are shielded. Even opposites get reconciled linguistically, like labor is seeking missile harmony. It reflects this beneficial destructiveness.
And those hyphenated terms, techno-military political jargon.
They force unity onto contradictions, creating a false sense of harmony. Irresistible unity.
And the casualty of all this functional language is history.
Yes. By focusing only on immediate facts, it suppresses the factors behind the facts, their historical roots. And Marquis says this isn't accidental, it's political.
Forgetting the past. Forgetting fascism, the ideals of socialism, the conditions for real democracy.
It liquidates memory, which is a source of critique. Remembering allows dissociation from the present, allows transformative concepts to emerge.
Even opposition movements can fall into this trap, using ritualized language.
Clinging rigidly to the past without connecting it effectively to the present, which hinders progress.
Okay, so how does he see concepts themselves operating in this one-dimensional thought?
He contrasts the traditional idea concept formed through reflection, mediating between experience and abstraction with operational concepts favored by social science within the system.
And focusing only on operational concepts leads to, what did he call it, fallacious concreteness.
Right. It isolates facts, stabilizes the whole repressive system by only looking at what's measurable now within the current setup.
Like that study on worker complaints, where broad dissatisfaction gets reduced to specific, manageable issues.
Exactly. Translating wages are too low into narrow operational terms strips away the broader social context, the universal conditions it points to.
So this approach rejects transcendent concepts, ideas that point beyond the given reality.
Like the idea of a popular mandate in democracy. It's dismissed as unrealistic because it assumes an engaged public that might not exist because opinion is managed.
So accepting the current reality as the only basis for analysis risks endorsing a false consciousness.
A purely descriptive analysis might miss the deeper meaning for those living it. Marcuse insists that in social theory, recognizing facts is also critiquing them.
So traditional negative thinking, the logic of protest, of contradiction gets sidelined?
Undermined, defeated even. Dialectical logic, emphasizing contradiction and negation, is eroded by a system that absorbs or eliminates opposition. The totalitarian universe of technological rationality is the result.
And this logic becomes the logic of domination itself.
Yes, domination persists, shifting from personal dependence to dependence on this seemingly objective order of things. But this order itself is a product of domination, perpetuating enslavement to the productive apparatus.
And modern science gets tied into this, its principles structured for control.
Theoretical operationalism aligns with practical operationalism. Scientific rationality gets used for dominating humans via dominating nature. Technology's liberating potential is reversed.
He even suggests science itself is tied to a specific societal project, viewing nature as quantifiable matter.
To explore this, he brings in Husserl's critique of scientific reason. Husserl looked at the socio-historical roots.
Husserl argued that mathematizing nature gave practical knowledge, but hid its basis in the everyday Lebenswelt.
Creating an illusion of autonomous, absolute truth when it was really just one method tied to a specific world of practice. Husserl saw technical aims embedded even in mathematical concepts.
So Galilean science, despite appearing pure, operated within a context aimed at dominating nature.
That's Husserl's provocative point. And his claim that our basic world of perception hasn't fundamentally changed despite math's advances suggests a limit to established science's ability to envision truly new ways of seeing.
So scientific thought outside physics can become formalism or empiricism, both avoiding contradiction and transcendence.
In total empiricism, by sticking to the current behavioral universe, becomes ideological, implicitly positive towards the status quo, despite claims of neutrality.
Unlike negative thinking or dialectics, a truly critical analysis of language needs to dig deeper.
Go beyond surface use, uncover hidden societal influences, the limits on thought. Positivism accepts prevailing frameworks, creates a closed world, violates empiricism by accepting a restricted experience as the whole reality.
Genuine analysis needs the meta-context of society, its power.
Abstracting from that falsifies the data. Ordinary language itself is shaped by manipulated contradiction, so it can't be a neutral philosophical standard.
Linguistic analysis should uncover how society shapes discourse, not just clarify usage within those limits.
And philosophical analysis always has an extra linguistic commitment. Political, aesthetic, moral judgments are unavoidable when deciding legitimate usage.
Dissolving concepts like mind or self into behavior isn't neutral. It's a societal process. Mutilation.
The mystification isn't in the old concepts, he argues, but in their reductive behavioral translation.
Okay, what about abstract things like the nation or the corporation? He sees them as real forces.
And hypostatized universals. They function as tangible realities above individuals, shaping their actions. They resist analysis because they are the concrete ground of functioning in that context.
The real ghost is the power of the whole over the individual, not metaphysical, but the actual state of affairs.
Exactly. And he distinguishes these from substantive universals like mind, which represent a complex synthesis of individual and social experience.
And then there are untranslatable universals: beauty, justice, happiness.
He suggests that they reflect an unhappy consciousness, the gap between potential and actuality. Their irreducibility stems from experiencing that gap. The abstract noun points to a real lack, qualities beyond specific examples.
So given all this critique, what's the way forward? He calls for transcendent projects.
Yes, while warning against pure metaphysics. He gives criteria for a higher rationality for such projects.
What are they?
Preserve or improve productivity, critically define the established structure, and offer a greater chance for pacification and free development. Importantly, negative features like repression aren't just side effects. They're integral to the system.
And he warns against the grand unification of opposites, where irrationality gets accepted as reason, blocking real change.
Right. Which brings us to his idea of a pacified existence.
Realizing human potential by mastering necessity, minimizing the struggle for survival, freeing up time.
Yes. This could reverse the science-metaphysics relationship. Scientific concepts could define a free existence. Formerly, metaphysical ideas of liberation could become objects of science.
So science would have to become political, recognize its own political nature.
And translating values into needs would involve both material satisfaction and non-repressive sublimation, changing the material-intellectual balance.
The logos of technology's rationale would aim for pacification, a liberating mastery of nature.
He sees glorifying raw nature as an ideology protecting an unnatural society. Progress means transcending nature's limits through reason.
And reason could converge with art in this post-technological rationality.
The more irrational society gets, the more rational the artistic universe might seem. He envisions art becoming a technique for dismantling misery. Aesthetics could inform machine design for free play.
But he's careful not to romanticize labor away completely, acknowledging Marx.
Right, labor can't just become play. But the mode and extent of necessary production could change dramatically if organized towards qualitatively different ends, affecting workers and their needs.
So faced with this one-dimensional society, the conclusion is the great refusal.
A fundamental rejection of a reason and wisdom that's become unacceptable. Even in total reification, he believes, a concrete ground for refusal must exist because the unification is illusory.
Despite society's capacity for control, there's still a specter of opposition.
Within and outside advanced societies, he holds out the possibility, maybe just a chance, of the most advanced consciousness converging with the most exploited forces.
And critical theory's role.
To remain negative, without guaranteed success. Loyal to those who engaged in the great refusal, even without hope.
Wow, okay. So, emerging from that deep dive into Marcuse's one-dimensional man, hopefully listeners have a clearer grasp of his analysis, how society operates, maintains control.
Yeah, it's complex stuff, but incredibly relevant still.
Our goal, as always, is just to give you that shortcut, spark some aha moments, without the information overload.
Definitely.
So on that note, maybe a final thought for listeners to chew on. Building on Marcuse, but maybe something we didn't explicitly hit on today.
Okay, how about this? Considering how pervasive technology is now, much more than in Marcuse's time, in what subtle ways might this one-dimensional thought be shaping your own perspectives? Maybe limiting the possibilities you can even imagine for yourself or for the future.
Ooh, that's a good one. Definitely something worth reflecting on. And of course, we encourage you to explore Marcuse's work further if this sparked your interest.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for